So today I'm going to be sculpting one of my planets, planet Amnesia, and here's that video because I don't know what to do for the intro. Today I'm sculpting planet Amnesia, starting off with using old clay because the clay is old and has actually been recycled, so it's a bit smelly now. So I'm doing this to still use it up, but I'm doing it for a project I know I'm keeping rather than one I'll sell. I made a big blob that will become the planet and a smaller one that will become the base. I actually put a random clay snail in the middle of the base to use it instead of throwing it away or making more stinky clay. Also, you may see me standing in some parts of the video, while in other videos I'm in my wheelchair. I'm an ambulatory or part-time wheelchair user. I'm able to stand for short periods of time, but not for a long time. I do stand whenever I'm able to because it keeps my muscles from atrophying. Anyways, it's now several days later and I'm able to start on some of the details. Right now I'm sculpting teeth. The reason why is because planet Amnesia is actually formed around the corpse of a very large creature. They were born from access magic from a mysterious creature, and they roamed asteroid belts until they retired, and when they napped, they saw Earth. They wanted a home as pretty as Earth, and eventually they were formed into that home. There's more to that story, but I'm currently writing about it for a book, so I'm trying not to include everything. Anyways, I sculpted teeth, and off camera I made 3 ribcage-like things. Now I'm sculpting the skull, and starting with the bottom jaw. I actually have the shape sketched out, and I squished the clay to match the shapes. After I have the shapes of the skull, I slide in the teeth. I later actually had to glue the teeth on because I couldn't smooth them into the wet clay without losing any detail, and that caused them to not attach. Also, you may see I'm using a weird tool to help me sculpt. This is actually something I used to luminate, but I basically have 200 of them, so I ended up using one for sculpting. Now I'm sculpting parts that will become the spine that would stick out of the planet. Some also became mountains. I also made what used to be their tail, and pieces that will become the huge trees that exist on Amnesia. Now I'm ripping off parts of clay that will become more mountains. I used one of my bottles of pills that help me digest dairy as a tool to shape the mountains. I know it is odd, but it works. Now I wet the surface of the planet base and smush more clay on it to form more of a round shape. I really don't recommend using so much clay, but again, I was trying to use up my stinky clay. Also did the same for the other side and fixed up the base to hold my sculpt. I then attached them off camera because it was a huge headache. Now it's time to actually smooth out the planet, so I wet the dried clay and smush on some wet clay. I know it looks very bad at first, but sculpting it mostly is just a trust the process art medium. Once I get the clay everywhere I want, I begin to smooth out the clay. Now for air dry clay, many will use water to smooth it out. I do the same. However, you want to use as little water as you can get away with. Instead, work the water into the clay instead of slapping a layer of water on it. If you just slap water on it, you will get a ton of cracks. However, no matter what, cracks are normal with clay and you can fix them later. It's just best to avoid it when possible. Anyways, while the clay is wet, I begin to attach the skull to the planet. I smush it into the wet clay some, then begin to smooth the wet clay into the skull I sculpted before. I add snakes of clay in any gaps to fill them up. Now, I could have done the planet before and sculpted the skull onto it, but with the skull being dry as I attach it, I don't have to worry about losing details or the skull's shape being deformed. To get the ribcage to stick in later, I poked them into the wet clay, then later removed them once everything dried. I then attached the tail at the back. I then let everything dry and I came back a few days later and added more clay so I could attach the mountains and spines, but I did that off camera because I felt too tired to record it. I apologize for the quality of this footage. I saved it in Google Drive and it just destroyed the quality. But now I'm sculpting the sandy parts of the land. This was very easy compared to the rest. I sketched out where I wanted the sand and then I rolled out snakes of clay and stuck them on with water. I then proceeded to slap the clay repeatedly with a toothbrush. Important to note, this brush was never used to clean my teeth. I've only used it to clean Little's Pet Shop toys very previously. I did as much as I could on camera, but I couldn't do it all at once, so the other half of the planet I did off camera. Now the next day, if I remember right, I started on the rest of the land. I rolled out more snakes of clay and stuck them where I wanted with water. I then filled in the rest of the area with clay and smoothed it out. I also covered parts of the skull to look more natural. Now, on Earth I know we have grass, but on Amnesia they don't. Instead, they have fungus that covers their ground. It took me a bit to figure out how I wanted to get the texture I wanted, but eventually I realized I could slap the clay with a toothbrush like I did with the sand, but this time gently smooth it out with water. I think it worked out well. I also stuck on the large trees I made, and later I secured them in with epoxy glue. I then took all the little circles of clay I made off camera and started sticking them on and ended up gluing them on later too. I tried to leave space between these and the larger trees because the large trees produce a chemical in them that doesn't let the small trees grow close by. This is also where I actually attached the rib cage. You would not believe how hard that was to read out. What? It's another day, and I covered the bottom half with watered down glue because I like putting glue over my sculptures before painting them because I feel it makes them stronger. I do apologize for the color because I like to tint my glue so I could see where I'm putting it, and I had a lot of brown paint left over, so I used that. But now I need to sculpt the frozen parts of Amnesia. Once again, I slapped down snakes of clay. And I fill in the rest with more clay. This time I try to make it look more lumpy. Fun fact, I had an extra big tree I didn't need, so I shoved it into one of the mountains and sculpted over it. I left this smooth to make it look more icy. I was finally able to change the camera angle to a better one, but of course now I need to learn how to stay in frame with this angle, so I apologize if y'all have a hard time seeing what I'm doing. Now I finally get to paint everything, and I started with Amnesia's water, which actually reflects pink. I did the first coat on camera and did the rest off camera. I actually had to do a coat after this with the lighter pink because it made the color build up faster. I promise you the pink paint was not as opaque as the camera makes it look. Now that I have the darker pink done, I need to go do the lighter pink. I got new brushes to dry brush better, but I still have no clue how to dry brush, no matter how many videos I watch. So I ended up getting more of the darker pink, and I blended it into the lighter color. By the way, I use a glove instead of a paper towel because I ordered these thinking it would help me hold things without getting paint on them. It just ended up making it worse, so now I use them to get the paint off my brushes. Anyways, now I'm doing a base coat of the light pink over the frozen area so it adds dimension when I dab white paint over it. I think I forgot to turn the ring light on here, I'm sorry. I then started painting the sand, which I lost the video of the base coat, I guess. I'm sorry, but now I'm dry brushing on the lighter color for the sand. Also, their sand is blue because I wanted it to be. I also started painting the skull, which I decided to paint a dark blue because of magic. Also, in the original concepts, it was actually red, but the blue looks way better than me. After blending in a lighter shade into the skull, I then started on the mountains, which are purple. I already did one before actually, and then remembered I need to do the sand first. I really struggled to stay in frame apparently. I cut out where I was basically just painting off camera. I also just painted the majority without recording because I needed to focus. I also added the highlights off camera because I needed to focus. Now it's time for me to add the color of the fungus, which 7 years ago we decided needed to be teal. At this point, it started to look like the planet we've been designing for around 7 years. I then started rubbing on the lighter color of the fungus so it didn't look so flat. I managed to record all of this, but I can't come up with enough things to say to show off. Curse everyone's low attention spans. Anyways, after finishing that, I started on the smaller trees, which, fun fact, are actually just weird mushrooms. The main color for them is a darker teal, but they also have yellow fruit spots, which I painted off camera. Now I'm starting on the large trees, which are actual trees. They're known as village trees actually, because they're hollow, so people are allowed to live inside them. I painted the trunks purple off camera, and I'm painting the tops of them yellow. And now I'm finally painting the spine and ribcage, and never mind, I'm suddenly painting the base of the sculpture, which you can barely see. And now I'm dabbing on more white paint to look like snow. Now we're ready for the reveal, but right before that, I just want to warn you that off camera I made a ring to go around planet Amnesia because it was too annoying to make on camera. So I hope y'all enjoyed seeing me sculpt Amnesia. I am very happy with how it came out, and I'm not looking forward to all the other plans I have to do. Anyways, see y'all some other Monday while I do Zeltor.